Hello and welcome.
Do you want me to introduce myself? So, hello and welcome to the Manhattan Meditation Center's Thursday night program, coming to you from Peace Village in the Catskills tonight. So, I wish you were right here in front of me. I never like knowing that you're out there in the dark somewhere. So just imagine that you're here in a big room and we're all together. And no matter where you are listening, let's pretend that we're all in the same room together and we're going to have a nice spiritual chat. My name is Judy Rodgers. I live in Peace Village. And tonight we're going to talk about freedom. We're going to talk about freedom. The topic is freedom, unattracted, unattached, and unentangled. So, let's think about freedom. So, when I mention freedom, what do you think of? I drew you a nice picture here, what some people think of. So, you're in your little red sports car and you're driving across the country. Or maybe you're on a motorcycle, or you're doing something that you've never done before. Wide open spaces. You're under your own power. No one is pulling on you. No one's expecting anything of you. You're completely free. Yeah? So that's one way to think of freedom. An image that you've had in your mind about how you could be completely free. But there's another way to think of freedom. So this character, can you see him? Can you see that he's in jail? I don't know how well you can see this guy. So I'm going to make sure you can see he's in jail. So see him here? He's behind bars, this guy. So this man's body is in jail, but it could be that his mind is completely free. Because we know people who have been incarcerated, who have been imprisoned, who said that actually in that state, they were completely free. So one of them was Martin Luther King, who wrote a very famous letter from the Birmingham jail. Another one was Nelson Mandela, imprisoned all those years on Robben's Island. And all the time, his mind was planning the future of South Africa as a free country. So freedom doesn't really have anything to do with the state of the body. I shouldn't say it doesn't have anything to do, because of course, if you're locked up, you're going to be distracted by that. But the kind of freedom that I want you to think about with me this evening is a deeper kind of freedom. It's freedom of the soul. And the body can be in prison. The body can have all kinds of restrictions. The body can be unable to move. You could be in a wheelchair. You could be in a hospital bed. You could be in all kinds of places of physical limitation. But the soul can be completely free. And this is our aspiration. This is why we actually come onto a spiritual journey, is for freedom. So I want to think with you tonight about what is freedom And how do we limit our own freedom? So, now can you see this little man? Can you see that he's in a spider web? So, when we get, increasingly what happens to us is we entrap ourselves. No one does it to us. We entrap ourselves. We limit ourselves. And we put ourselves in a situation like this, where we actually aren't free. And so I want to think about a few ways that we do that. The first one is we tend to get trapped in a bondage to things. We get trapped in a bondage to things. So I'm going to tell you a story. So, and if we've been together before, you might have heard me talk about a time when my house was on fire. But I'm not going to tell you that whole story tonight. What I'm going to talk about is after the fire. So the house had been on fire. The fire department had come and gone. They had taken away all of my clothing to be cleaned. And when they brought the clothing back, I was upstairs in my house. I was looking out at the street, and I saw two vans pull up. Now, I lived alone. So these two vans took out all this clothing and brought it into the house, and all of it was mine. I was so upset to think that living alone, I had two vans full of clothing. How could you possibly wear that much clothing? You'd have to be changing clothes every hour and a half to wear that much clothing. So I realized that I really didn't want to be in that situation. I didn't want to own all of that, insure all of that, clean all of that, store all of that. So I made a commitment that I was going to simplify my life. I didn't want to be in bondage to all these things. So I started immediately giving things away. I got big bags. I put the extra clothing in the bags. I gave it away. And then I planned that I was going to move out of this big house. And I did. I moved from Chicago to Boston, and I moved into a little small house, and I was just fine. And I was on my way, right, to keeping my vow to leading a simpler life. And then after I lived in that house for about a year, I decided that I needed to move. It was a rental, and I got a realtor to drive me around and look at houses. And the realtor took me in front of this big house that had pillars and a big round circular driveway. And I told her I'd buy it. And I bought this house. I forgot my promise. And I filled the house with furniture and art. And I was sitting in there, living in the house a few months later, and things began to go wrong with houses, as they always do. You know, I had to repair a light fixture, so I called the electrician. Then I had to convert a dryer to gas. And I was planning for about an hour, and it took him 2 days. And I said, 2 days? And he said, well, lady, this is an old house. I mean, these things are going to happen. And suddenly I remembered that I wasn't going to do this anymore. I wasn't going to be in bondage to all of these things. And so I walked to the realtor's office and I said, I'm going to sell this house. She hadn't even spent the commission that she'd made when I bought the house. It was such a short time. But I told her, I said, you don't understand. I made this promise to simplify and I forgot. So I literally sold the house and I began moving into a smaller place. And then I moved again into a still smaller place. And I did that for 10 years until I moved into a really tiny place, which is where I live now in great happiness. Now, what do we need to understand about this? Our society, and this is true in many, many countries around the world, the US isn't the only place where we have become very trapped in the things that we want, and the things that we buy, and the things that we collect, and the things that we acquire. And when we acquire more things, we don't own those things. Those things own us. I had to go to work more hours to pay for this house that I thought I had to have. And you might be doing the same. The more things that you have, the more in bondage to those things you are. The more you have to work, the more you have to save money and manage them and clean them and organize them and store them and insure them. These things that we own end up owning us. Now, how do you know you're in a bondage? How can you tell that you've lost your freedom or you're beginning to lose your freedom? Because your mind keeps going to that thing. So I would walk through that big house and all I could think was, oh, I have to have that repaired. Oh, I have to have that cleaned. Oh, that needs to be painted. I've got to hire someone to do this to the yard constantly. It was a constant list of things. And it's the same with cars. It's the same with anything that in any of the things in our lives. We do it with devices, right? I have my laptop, I've got my desktop, I've got my phone, I've got my iPad, I've got all the little attachments and all the little plugs, USB-C, USB, all of the complexity of that. And where's my mind? My mind's over here managing my devices. So you have to notice, where does your mind go? And if your mind is over here managing, thinking about things that you have, you're in a bondage. You've lost some of your freedom. You don't really have your mind for you. You can't really think about the things you want to think about. You can't dedicate your mind to a higher ambition, because every time you sit to have a more elevated thought, your mind goes over to the house you have to repair, or the car you have to get fixed, or the device you have to fix or upgrade or whatever. So this is a bondage to things. I would say it's the first level of bondage, is our bondage to things, our obligations to things, how we imprison ourselves by the things we acquire. So what's the second kind of bondage? I would say that the second kind of bondage is to people. Now, this is a tricky one. So some relationships are very healthy. You might call them a karmic relationship. You know, they're easy. You give easily to the other one. You take easily from the other one. If the other one doesn't do exactly what you want, it's okay. If you don't do exactly what they want, it's okay. That's a simple relationship. Love is easy in that. Caring is easy in those relationships. But there's another kind of relationship that we might call a karmic bondage. These relationships are much more complicated, and a lot of us have these relationships, especially they're often with people close to us. Parents and children, spouses, siblings. So how do you know if you're in one of these relationships? Well, one thing is that there's a lot of push-pull in those relationships. There's a lot of expectations in those relationships. I made my mother a bowl of soup, but she didn't even say thank you. Or I invited her to my party, but I think she might have had a party and she didn't invite me back. Or, right? There's all these expectations and these disappointments that happen when you're in a karmic bondage. There's, you try to make the other one happier, but they actually get sadder. You try to leave or they try to leave and there's tears or sorrow. Do you recognize this? So that's a karmic bondage. I'm remembering a friend of mine. I worked with a man for many years in television, and he had 2 children. And the daughter I worked with, but the son actually had many college degrees, but he required a lot of care. He required a lot of sustenance. He required a lot of. His father was often saving him, and so the years went by, and I kind of lost track of the family. And the man I had worked with passed away, and then many years later, I saw his wife. And I went to see her and I said, "Is someone living with you?" And she said, "Yeah, that's my son." I said, "Oh, I thought he was somewhere else." "No, he moved back here." "Okay." And then she began to tell the stories of, well, he has to use my car and he has to go to work someplace in my car. So I really don't have a way to get around during the day. And she starts giving this list of was essentially the same relationship that had happened when the father was alive. And this is not about not having your children live with you, because that can be a very happy relationship, but it's about obligation. What did the son expect? What did the mother expect? There was sorrow. She felt burdened. She felt frightened about the future. He felt burdened. He felt entitled. "You're my mom. You have to take care of me." Push, pull, back and forth. In these karmic bondages, there's not so much happiness. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it later, but I would suggest there's not so much true love. What we call love in a karmic bondage isn't really true love. And we'll get to that in a minute, all right? So attachment to things, attachment to people, entanglement with people, bondage with people, and then this last one I want to talk with you about is being trapped in a bondage of our bodies. So the soul comes into the body, and it's almost as if the body is us, isn't it? I mean, we live inside this body. We know everything about it. We know how it's feeling. Every little headache or tummy ache or whatever goes on in the body, we pick it up right away. So it's very easy to get very attached to the body. It's very easy to get to the place where we're actually absorbed with the body. And this again, how do you tell? Where does your mind go? Is your mind thinking about what your face looks like, or what your hair looks like, or whether you need to work out or go on a diet, or on and on and on? Of course, you're going to care for the body. But when you find that the mind is constantly thinking about the body, then you have to ask yourself, what's happened? Where has your freedom gone? Your freedom has gone to your body. And now you're thinking all the time about your body. But what about when you're sick, right? I have 3 friends recovering from serious surgery right now. And all of them have to pay attention to the body. But there's a difference between caring for the body and being absorbed by what's going on with the body. So there's a saying that we have that you have to settle karma, but you don't have to suffer. So you might have to have something go on with your body. You might have a surgery. You might break your arm. You might have things go on with the body. But what's going on in the mind? So if the body is settling, okay, so you take care of the body. But if the mind is continually absorbed with your sorrow or your worry or your suffering, if you're constantly talking about the body and thinking about the body and absorbed with the body, now you've lost your freedom. Now you're in bondage to this body. So it's the same syndrome, right? Whether it's the house or a car or your things, or whether it's the relationships with your family and friends, or it's your relationship with your body, it's what's going on in your mind and your heart. If your mind is going to the things, if your mind is going to the relationship, if your mind is going to the body, then you've lost your freedom. So how does this happen to us? How do we lose our freedom? I think first we have to think, what is freedom? What's the state we're in when the soul is completely free? So the soul, in its natural state, is completely peaceful. So peaceful. Peaceful as a starry night. As peaceful as a calm lake. Completely still. The soul, when it's in freedom, has natural love in the heart. The heart is clean. There's no worry in a free heart. There's no sorrow when your heart is free and clean. There's no anger. There's no anxiety. All of those feelings are gone. The soul, in its natural state, is in a state of contentment. So it's peaceful, it's loving, it's contented, it's happy, it's kind. So the clean heart. And the mind is stable. It's not fluctuating. It's not bounding up and then down and then up and then down. It's bondages that make the mind fluctuate like that. But the mind, in a soul, in its natural state, in its free state, the mind is stable. The mind is your friend. The mind makes you feel great. And the intellect, so clear. You're so discerning. You know what you have to do. You're not in quandaries. You're not confused. The intellect is really clear. Do you remember this state? Can you recall this state? Can you summon this state? This is the state in which you have all the time you need for those you love. You have all the time you need for the self. You have all the time and attention you need for your spiritual life, for your inner well-being. But you naturally know what you need to do. You naturally recognize an urge when it comes to you inside. I should do this. I should call this one. I should check in on this one. These thoughts come floating up. When the heart is clear and clean, and the mind is stable, we know what's going on inside, and we know exactly what we have to do. And we're light. We're completely light. There's no heaviness inside. And we don't have to work to be loving. That love flows naturally out of us. So this is the state that we're going for. This is why we go on to a spiritual path. This is the way we want to live our lives. We want to live our lives in that state of freedom, in that state of natural joy. That is our birthright. Every soul deserves to live in that way, to wake up in the morning feeling that way, to move through their day feeling that way. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about freedom. Now, what happens to us that makes us lose that freedom? So the first thing that happens is we get attracted. You could say you get pulled. or you get influenced. Like when that realtor drove me by that house, I had made a promise to myself that I was going to lead a simple life. But she drove me past that house and I became attracted to that house. When we get attracted or pulled or influenced by things, by our body, by other people, by the past, what happens to us is we forget what our intention had been. So the first step in going off track, losing our freedom, is when we get attracted. Now, after we get attracted, we've got a choice, right? One is to notice, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I don't want a big house like that. Let me go back and remember what I was about to do. I was simplifying my life. Or if I don't have that recognition, then what happens is I move towards the thing I'm attracted to and I kind of clamp onto it. Now I'm attached. Now, in the spiritual world, we often hear about detached and how important it is to be detached. And yet, that's not a great word in English. It sounds like you don't care. But actually, detachment, the ability to notice something but not move towards it, is considered to be a great spiritual skill. And only when we are detached can we have true love. And I know that sounds really improbable. So if we become attached, what happens is now I have expectations. I've attached to this thing or this person or to the body with certain expectations about how this is going to play out. What's the outcome going to be? And whenever I have expectations, and this is especially true about people, that brings disappointment. With expectations comes sorrow. She didn't say thank you. She didn't give it back to me. He borrowed this, but he didn't even appreciate that I'd given it to him. All of that comes from attachment. And then if we, on beyond this move of attachment, is getting entangled. Now, when we get entangled with something or with people, what's happened to us is that we actually have taken actions that are going to cause a reaction from the other person. So if I've become entangled in, here I realized I was going to show you this. So attracted, attached, and now entangled. With entanglement, I've actually taken some kind of an action now that complicates my life. Maybe I've borrowed money, or I've lent you money, or maybe we've gone in on something together. We now own something together, and the push-pull of our relationship is now being played out in material ways. Or maybe with entanglement, I may, to make it a little more difficult, I may now have negative thoughts about you. I may say negative things about you, or you may say them about me. Resentful things, or things that about what's bothering you in this relationship. So now what was an attraction that we thought was beneficial, now we find we're in a negative relationship, that the exchange between us is complex, and it's not loving, it's not reinforcing. It's all caught up in the disappointments that we feel. So when that happens, when I'm saying or doing unkind things to you, when you're saying or doing demanding things to me, now we have this push-pull of this complicated karma. And it makes it very hard to take ourselves back to freedom. And how do we know? Because our mind is absorbed. We keep replaying these scenes that are happening between us. So we don't want to be in this state. We want to be in the state of freedom. So how do we get ourselves from a state of entanglement or attachment or even attraction back to a place of freedom, which is where we want to be? So when I'm...
There is a question.
Oh, there's a question. All right, let's hear the question.
So, how to deal with people who cheat, trick, and then run away?
Okay, a question. We're still in an entanglement, it sounds like. How to deal with people who cheat, trick, and then run away. All right, this is the challenge, right? And this is how we're going to get to freedom. So, when we are in a complicated bondage relationship with someone, when we have expectations of them and they behave badly, so let's say they've cheated and they've tricked, or they've tricked and they are slipping away, we have some choices. So one choice is that I chase them down and I say, I'm not going to be treated like that, right? Or I can yell at them or let them know how I feel. That's one choice. A second choice is that I let them go physically, but in my mind, I don't let them go. Or my heart. This is often a matter of the heart. So the mind may not want to let them go, but in the heart, I feel really hurt, right? When someone cheats on me or tricks me, my heart is really hurt. And so even if they physically go away, my heart might be filled with sorrow. And in that case, I'm still entangled. I'm not free. Because when my mind is free, or when unoccupied, it goes and replays that scene. It goes and says to itself, see what happened? And you replay it and you think what you're going to tell that person, right? You tell them off in your mind, but your heart won't let go. And so you're sitting with a lot of sorrow, like that man in jail that I drew you. So freedom, there's no sorrow when you're in a state of freedom. There's no anger when you're in a state of freedom. There's no blame when you're in a state of freedom. Nor is there any guilt when you're in a state of freedom. So what you have, and it's not on this, so I'm just going to talk you through it. There is a way to let someone go, or let something go, with only good wishes. Now, you can't pretend on this. You can't really be sad but say, well, good luck to you, right? That doesn't work. That's not freedom. If you're really going to be free, you have to look at the other person with a certain kind of vision. And I want to talk about that road to freedom. So here's this little man again. He's not in prison. He's not in his car. He's not in a spider web. He's free. The awareness that we have when we move towards freedom is first, who am I? if I'm so-and-so's husband or wife, or I'm so-and-so's sister, belong to this boss or that job or whatever, then I'm probably going to get myself tangled up. But as a spiritual pilgrim or a spiritual seeker, or in your spiritual work, what you become aware of is you are light. You're a soul. You're a soul working through this body. You're a soul who was originally completely peaceful, loving, and happy. The other one, the one who just cheated and tricked you and ran away, is also a soul. And as souls, we have patterns that we have acquired over time. And that when we come onto a spiritual path, what we want to do is change those patterns. We want to free ourselves from these relationships. Sometimes we find that we keep creating the same kinds of relationships. That we keep getting into attaching relationships, or we keep getting into relationships in which we either someone lets us down, or someone betrays us, or someone harms us in some way, and we think, why? What am I doing that's attracting this? But there's some pattern in us that's pulling some pattern in them. And so if we're going to free ourselves, it starts with the self. So first, I have to go inside and I have to say, I am completely loving and completely at peace. And I have to bring myself to this place. I have to look and see in my heart what's going on. And you might, when you go inside, you might find all kinds of things are going on. There might be all kinds of memories, and there might be competition, and there might be feelings of jealousy and hurt and all that stuff that can live in the heart. And I think in another talk, I talked a little bit about this. How do we clear the heart? But what you're on your way to is getting your heart to the place where it releases those things, which is more than we can talk about in the time we have. And you have for the other person really good wishes. And that's the choice 3. So yeah, you can fight back, or you can let them go and hold sorrow in the heart. In both of those cases, you're in bondage, right? You're not in freedom. But when you move to freedom, I'm in soul consciousness. I realize that I am light, and I may have complicated my life in the past, but now, just like the vow I made on that house, right? Now I'm going to simplify my life. Now I'm going to clean my heart, stabilize my mind, and free myself. I'm going to live in a state of freedom. So you make that intention inside. You make this vow, this commitment to yourself inside, that this is how you want to live. You don't want to live in bondage to these people or these things or to these illnesses of the body or whatever. So it starts with a clear intention. This is my intention. And then when you feel each time this thought comes back, and it can come back at first almost every second, you keep removing that thought and you reset in soul consciousness. I am a loving soul. I am a peaceful soul. I am a free soul. So anytime this thought comes, anytime the pain comes in the heart, move it out of the heart and bring yourself back. It's as if you are standing back and looking at yourself in life with a little bit of detachment, almost like you're seeing your life on a movie screen. And the real you is sitting back and saying, I am not that. I am not that. So with that clear intention and with that loving feeling in the heart, you recenter yourself. Now, this business, so how do I relate to others? When I am in that soul consciousness, when I'm able to summon the natural state of the soul, peace, love, happiness, kindness, compassion, generosity, sweetness, all of that is natural to the soul. It's inside you. And you're putting yourself back in touch with that. So you're detached from the craziness of your life. You have this intention to live in that state, this state of soul consciousness and clarity. And now you have good wishes for the other one, real good wishes. So what does that sound like? May things go well for you. May your life be filled with sweetness, with goodness, with happiness. I wish you the very best. Now, what happens when we're able to do this? When I'm able to say, I wish you the very best. I have ended the push-pull with the other person. I'm not creating a karmic account where I push them and they push back at me and I push back at them and we remain all tangled up. When I can look at the other one and say, may things go well for you. Now, I know this is not easy, especially in cases, for example, where we're responsible for someone, right? Where we have a parent or a child that's counting on us. How do we keep ourselves from being all tangled up there? And a lot of that has to do with maintaining that detachment. So if I've made soup for this one, I've taken lunch over to someone, my happiness, if I've kept myself filled with love and happiness, then I'm giving to that one from overflow. I'm so filled with happiness and joy that I donate that from overflow. I don't care if you give me anything back. I don't care if you thank me. My ability to give to you was what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do, was give you, share this with you. If you don't say a thing, no problem. So it has to do with keeping the self so full that we're not needing anything. See, the reason that we get in these complicated situations, the reason you want the house or the car, the reason you get tangled up in the relationships, or the reason that we get all focused on the body too much, is that we're not full inside. Imagine that you and I had just had a big breakfast together. Let's say we ate until we were very satisfied. And then we said goodbye, and you went to someone's home, and the person said, look, I've made lunch for you. What would you say? You wouldn't eat it, right? You would say, I just ate. I'm completely full. I don't need another thing. I mean, I can sit with you while you eat, but I'm completely full. That's the secret. We stay completely full as much as we can, full of peace, full of love, full of happiness, and then we don't need anything else. We don't need to buy all those things to make ourselves feel better. We don't need for our mother or sister or child or whatever to make us feel important or valuable, because we're so full. We get full, and this is the ultimate in a spiritual life. So there's two important things, at least in a spiritual life. Let's say the main things. One is that I know who I am. I know I'm a spiritual being. And I don't ever forget that. I don't ever think I'm the body. I know I'm the soul. And I operate from that consciousness all the time. And when I look at someone else, however badly they're behaving, my awareness is, well, that one is also a soul. Eternal, loving, peaceful, good, giving, generous, etc., in their normal state. And so I have that good wishes for them. So that's the first thing. I am a soul. I am a spiritual being. And the second thing is that I have an ancient, timeless, direct relationship with the spiritual parent. And that's what yoga is. Yoga is the soul connecting with the Supreme Soul, the soul connecting with the source energy of life and goodness. Now, the real reason why we don't want to be in relationships of bondage of any kind is that when we are in those relationships and the mind is continually pulled and the heart is continually heavy, we can't feel God's love. We can't connect with the divine. This is a huge loss. We're giving up the greatest treasure of the spiritual life, the spiritual journey, and occupying ourselves in something very trivial. Although it doesn't feel trivial, right? It feels like the most important thing going on is this problematic relationship. But actually, it's just a play. It's a drama. It's a side scene going on in front of us. And it's keeping us from being able to connect. When the soul is finally able to connect with the Supreme Soul, with its spiritual parent, when the soul is able to have that experience, suddenly all of that original gift, all the original state of happiness and love and silence and purity and peace comes back into the soul. And the soul wakes up and remembers, this is what I knew before. I've been here before. This is my true state. This is where I belong. And in that state, the soul can be completely generous. But if we allow ourselves to be in bondage, we can't have that. Because God's energy, the current from the Supreme Soul, the current from the source is very subtle. I've sometimes said that for those of you who've been in Times Square, if there is someone on the corner of one of those intersections playing the piccolo or the flute, you probably wouldn't hear them. Because the horns honking and the neon lights flashing, and you'd never notice. The energy of the source, the energy of God, the energy of the Supreme Soul is so subtle. It's the most refined energy in creation. And there's nothing to prevent you from having direct contact with that energy, except getting in your own way. If you allow yourself to live in the bondages of all these things, then there's this great loss. You don't get to have that relationship. And you don't get to have clean relationships with others. When you are satisfied, spiritually contented, when you are really at peace, when you're really happy, when you feel the fortune of who you really are, then you're not really looking to be satisfied in other ways. And everything you do, then, every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take comes from that well of happiness and peace and joy and love. Everything you do then is serving. Everything you do is bringing benefit to others. As you move towards this, your life gets much simpler. The relationships aren't nearly as complicated. You find you don't really want a bunch of stuff. You don't want the distraction of it. You really want to have your time and attention to yourself so you can take it to high ground. Because the quality of life, when you're able to go to that high ground, is so much better. It's so much sweeter. You feel like you're flying, right? Like you're detached from all of the heaviness of that, and you're really flying. So, true freedom is not the sports car, although you could be truly free and have a sports car. They're not mutually exclusive. But true freedom doesn't have to do with so much with where your body is. It has to do with where your mind is, where your intellect is, where your heart is. It has to do with your lightness, your inner confidence, because a soul that's truly free knows that everything is going to be okay. Nothing is going to rob you of your treasures that are naturally yours, that are your natural birthright. So we need more time together, right? Because we probably have questions, and I would love to talk with you about all of that. But I'd like to, unless there is a question that you have, I'd like to move to a meditation.
There is one, but I think you already answered it. I'll anyways read it. I'm working from home since March. I live in my tiny studio. I feel very irritated as I was expecting my office to open, but they're not opening by mid next year. How do I entangle myself from the irritated feeling?
Okay, so we did have a question. Did you hear the question? Working from home in a tiny apartment, hoping the office would open and you could go back, and you're feeling irritated, right? So that is a bondage, right? Because you're there wanting that office to open so that you can go back and resume your life and hoping that that will bring you some happiness. So whenever we are counting on something outside of us to bring us happiness or peace of mind, then we have given away our freedom, because we're saying, I will only feel free and happy when this thing happens that I can't control. Do you see the problem? I will only feel happy if I can have this expensive thing. I can only feel happy if this person will pay attention to me. I only feel happy if the office opens. When it's something outside of me that is going to have to happen for me to feel happy, then I'm not in freedom. I'm in bondage to that thing happening. So for us to remain free, we have to move the control back inside. How do I make myself happy and peaceful and loving? So I remember who I am. I am light. I am a soul. I'm eternal. I am naturally happy. I was happy. There was a time before this complication that I was happy. And I returned myself to that memory. What was it like when I was really joyful? And I don't let the thought come in. If the thought comes in from the outside that says, oh, I'm not going to be able to go to the office till July, take that thought and take it out of your mind and put back in your mind, I am a joyful soul. I'm so lucky I've got this place to be in. And I've got this time to make myself more aware of what really matters in life. So give yourself the gift of the moment that you're in, that you can control. Don't let yourself be wanting something that other people can control. Give yourself the gift of what you can control. And then have good wishes. May everybody be okay. May I be okay. And then keep yourself connected. Keep yourself quiet and internal so that you can hear that flute player in Times Square. So you can feel the current of that subtle energy and know that it's completely possible for you to fill yourself with that joy and that happiness, that love, that sweetness. Don't focus on the thing you can't have. Focus on what you can have for yourself. I know it sounds easier, right? But it's completely possible. You can absolutely do this. And you need to do this. We're not in easy times. The times we're in are very challenging. We're quarantining, we have masks, there's all kinds of discomfort in the world, which is even more why we have to make ourselves comfortable. The discomfort in the world is out there in the world. Don't let it come into your heart. Don't let it come into your mind. Keep your mind and heart clean and happy and peaceful. You are a trustee for those. No one else is going to do that for you. No one else will come in and say, well, let me clean your heart up for you. Let me get rid of that sorrow. You have to do that. We have to clean our own hearts. We have to keep our own mind stable. So watch where the mind goes. If the mind goes out to things, if the mind goes outside to try to comfort itself, make time to bring it inside and bring your own comfort from knowing who you are, having that good wishes, keeping connected to the source. So let's close with a little meditation. Om Shanti.
Observation is a form of deep listening, not just with the ears, but with the soul. We can observe our natural world. We can observe our thoughts and perceptions and relationships. But for now, we are simply going to observe the self. And to observe clearly, we need to detach first. So let go now of expectations, of any pressures around you, the dramas of your life, and move into silent observation of your breath. Just observing it as it moves in and out. And as you turn your attention inward, away from the world of sights and sounds. Simply observing the breath going in and out. Observing how you're beginning to feel. Now allow your mind to depart, to take a stairway of consciousness away from the world of matter, away from the gravity of the physical world, and feel yourself become just light, just spiritual energy. Imagine that you are thousands and thousands of miles away from the earth, hovering above. And observe your life as a film strip going on down there. Just observe maybe some of the recent or distant scenes of your life. And ask yourself this question: what is meaningful in my life? What is meaningful in my life? Observe any feelings that may come in response to that question, any visuals, any thoughts. What is meaningful in my life? Keep observing yourself, your thoughts, your feelings in response to that question. When we detach first, we can observe and listen from a deep place of silence. Now take the stairway of consciousness even higher, beyond any reach of the physical world. Allow your soul to go higher and higher as you feel lighter and more weightless and even more silent. And enter a sea of pure light that soothes you, that welcomes you, that is a sanctuary of silence. And ask yourself this question: who am I? Who am I? And again observe. Observation is like deep listening. Observe your thoughts, observe your feelings, or any visuals coming up. And again, go back to the question: who am I truly? Notice your response to that. And then take that stairway of consciousness back towards the physical world, coming back into the world of sights and sounds. Sense yourself as the soul in the physical body, in the costume of the body. And again, observe your presence, your breath, the way you feel right now in this moment. We can learn much about ourselves through this form of observation, which is like deep listening. But to do it deeply and effectively, we first need to detach from our roles, from our expectations, from the sights and sounds of the world, so that we can observe in silence.